What we're going to do today is we are going to talk a little bit about the River District update, which is very important to all of us. Not only for Bella Casa, but for the entire community of Fort Myers. It comes a time sometimes that we have to support our community, and the best way is supporting downtown. All of our projects, it's the heart. I always say the heart is pumping, the arteries will do much better, and we are part of that artery. So the heart is pumping, guys. It's happening. The River District is now coming to life. And without any further ado, I think I'm not the appropriate person to share this information. I think our hero here, I've always called him that, of the Executive Director of Downtown Fort Myers. He's been our rock. He's been a person who's been going in front of that city council, meeting with a lot of people, and he finally got it to go again. So I think he's going to share. Without any further ado, Mr. Don Pate. Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Barbara. Some people just call me crazy for doing what I do for the number of years I've been doing it. I'd like to keep this somewhat informal. What I'd like to do is go through a little PowerPoint. And what I'd like to do is, in order to look ahead at the future, I think it's important to look at the past, where we've been, how we got where we're going. And so I'm going to just briefly take you on a little historical tour of modern day Fort Myers and what's going on there. First of all, I'm part of the Fort Myers Redevelopment Agency. The Community Redevelopment Agency is an agency of the city, but we're set up under state law. We use what's called tax increment financing. Essentially, that means new projects like the new Cypress Club that I'll talk about in a minute gets built. The taxes that it generates, instead of going into the general fund, goes into a trust fund for us to spend in downtown. That's how we do things like the streetscape project, waterfront, the new water basin, the new hotel that's coming along, things like that. We also have a number of redevelopment areas around the city. Mainly we're on the commercial corridors in downtown. We have Palm Beach Boulevard, Martin Luther King we're working on. We're working on Cleveland Avenue, but we do have some residential neighborhoods as well. But downtown is the oldest district. I'm going to take you through three different plans real briefly. 1986, the city did the first modern day plan for downtown. It was the first one that had been done since the 1920s. A company out of Minneapolis called BRW put it together. And it had a list of recommendations. And the one thing I'll have to say about the city of Fort Myers is it follows the plans that it develops. The plans don't sit on a shelf. When the 86 plan came out, there was a list of things that they said at that time we needed to accomplish in order to try to get downtown back on track. Because if you recall, back in the 80s, pretty much everything had moved out. And what hadn't moved out, there wasn't much left of it. And then in 2003, the Dwani plan, as we call it, was put together, ushered into really the modern day era of the downtown revitalization. And then I'll touch briefly on the 2010 downtown plan that we did just recently to try to activate the waterfront. Just briefly, the major accomplishments from the 86 plan, some things that we kind of forget about because they seem like they've been there forever, but things like the Comprehensive Government Center. About the first week I was on the job, I got a call from the chairman of my board, Steve Zahorian, who was president of Barnett Bank at the time. And he said, well, the county, the state, the federal government just announced that they're moving their headquarters out of downtown. I want you to stop that and keep them in downtown, because if they leave, all the attorneys are going to leave, the architects, the engineers, all the professions that deal with government. So we came up with a plan to assemble land downtown for their expansion needs and guarantee that we could deliver it at a price that fit their budget for a suburban site. If not, we'd make up the difference. Bottom line is we were able to keep all levels of government in downtown. When we started, we had about 600,000 square feet of government office space. Today we have 1.6 million square feet. The county has expanded. The state built a 250,000 square foot state regional service center. So that was a major accomplishment that really kind of got us on track. Centennial Park and the Riverwalk downtown, the 10-acre waterfront park, we helped fund that. That was a product of the plan. The City of Palms and the Main Street parking garages, we started then going vertical with our parking instead of the surface lots. The Harborside Event Center, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but that was all part of the plan, along with getting downtown designated as both a local and national historic district. That allowed us to use tax credits and encourage rehab of a lot of the old buildings. And then finally, the boat ramp and the commercial piers were built or rebuilt at that time as well. So we accomplished probably about 80 to 85% of the recommendations that were in that 86 plan. Took a while to do that, but when the turn of the century came in 2000, 2001, we said we really need to revise this plan. We don't need to throw it out and start over, but we need to take that plan and update it. What are the new things that we should be looking at? We're very fortunate in that we hired Andreas Duani. Duani kind of picks the cities he works in. He's an internationally renowned architect and urban planner. We were very fortunate to get him to come here. In the space of what he calls his 2-week planning charrettes, we had over 1,500 people attend the sessions with him. I mean, he's a very exciting, dynamic guy. But Duani had about 15 major goals that he left for us in the plan. He said there's a number of things that you've got to do if you want to really keep the redevelopment going. One is preserving our historic heritage. We're a local and a national historic district. The whole core area of downtown is listed on the National Register as a historic district. It was very important to try to keep those old buildings intact. Unlike a lot of cities, we didn't lose too many of them. There was a few, but a lot of them retained. And we offered facade grants and low-interest loans to encourage property owners to start renovating. This is the Bradford block, and you can see the difference just on the bottom slides is what we call from a slip-covered building that had been all covered over to the building on the right is the same building after the false facade was taken off. And we encouraged a lot of that throughout downtown. Utility replacement and streetscape was another major project that Duani said you've got to do the streetscape. But we knew we couldn't do the streetscape until we had the money to do the underground utilities. Being an old city, Fort Myers water, sewer, and drainage was 70 and 80 years old. It was constantly breaking, couldn't keep up with the modern day development. We finally partnered with the city. They came up with $40 million from utility bonds. We agreed to put $12.5 million in from our tax increment. So city paid for all the underground work. All 54 blocks of downtown have been completely redone with all new underground utilities. And then we went back in with the streetscape. That made for a much more attractive environment. One of Duani's other goals was create a pedestrian-friendly, walkable city. Our streetscape did that. We widened sidewalks. We allowed for sidewalk cafes, put a lot of street trees in. And the brick that you see, when you walk on First Street or Hendry or Main Street, any of the old streets in the historic area, those are all the original historic brick from the 1920s that we salvaged when we started digging up the streets. And I'm pleased to say that we used prison labor and community service labor to clean 500,000 bricks by hand so we could then relay them back down in the streets again. So when you walk on First Street and you cross that street, you're walking on the same bricks that Henry Ford and Thomas Edison walked on when they lived in our community. The other thing I'd like to point out is our streetscape project, which Duani designed, and Craft Construction locally built that for us, won 7 state and national awards and an international award for the best walkable streetscape I think it was 3 years ago, from the International Making Cities Livable Council. And we were in competition against cities all around the world. So I was very proud of that one. But we also created an event destination. In order to attract businesses, we had to attract people. And to get people down there, when there wasn't dining establishments and there wasn't a lot of retailing, the events started that off. Originally, our office did a lot of the events. We've since turned that over to the River District Alliance. We give them a grant of about $145,000 a year to go into the events. But things like Art Walk and Bike Night and Mystery Walk and car cruise-ins, there's almost every weekend an event going on. And a lot of the retailers survive off those events. I know some retailers that will do 2 and 3 months rent in a one-night event. And so it's very important to them. That's helped us bring some of the retailers down. Recently we've had Lululemons that moved in, the women's athletic clothing store. We've had an ice cream shop that just signed a lease last week. And the nice thing about our retailing, with the exception of Subway and Starbucks, for both restaurants and retail, all of our businesses are local. They're either one of a kind or locally owned businesses. We don't have national chains and franchises, so that's something that we're actually very proud of. Offers something different than the malls. Also establishing a cultural campus, attracting more cultural arts, public art galleries. That was a very important tenet. We've got quite a few of those. Public art, we've got 12 pieces of public art. Hopefully you've seen the one in front of the Sidney Byrne Davis Art Center at night. This was donated actually by Florida Power and Light. It's a really spectacular piece in the evening. Also Florida Rep. We help fund Florida Rep. We rent the theater from the Smith family. We pay the rent on that, give it to Florida Rep for free. We also give them an operating subsidy each year. Florida Rep, if you haven't been there, is a live professional theater company. It's Broadway quality, and that's not me saying that. That's the Wall Street Journal theater critic, Terry Teachout. The last 6 years has come down and reviewed a play at Florida Rep. His reviews have consistently been phenomenal. In fact, some of his quotes were as good as or better than Broadway. So they're fabulous productions, and they're up for a Tony Award. I think in the next couple of years you're going to see Bob Cacioppo, the producing director, achieve a Tony Award for Best Regional Theater in the country. And he's meeting all the criteria to be eligible for that, including having a National Theater Critic. And right now running is a world premiere of a play that was written about 20 years ago, never put on. The playwright worked with Bob Cacioppo and his staff over the last year to perfect this play, and it's now running as a world's premiere. So Florida Rep is great. They attract about 100,000 people a year down to their productions, and we found a lot of those people go to dinner, walk around, go to the shops before and after the show. Attracting new hotels. As you probably know, when the Sheraton closed down, or Ramada, Amtel, whatever you know it by, that has been closed for about 8 years, really put us out of the convention business. And then at the same time, we had some of the other hotels along the waterfront, like the Holiday Inn, the Ramada Inn, whose sites were bought up for some of the high-rise condos. So we started trying to attract hotels. The Indigo was the first one. It's a small 67-room boutique hotel. Despite the fact that it did go through a foreclosure, the current owners are doing quite well with it. They're getting some terrific room rates, and their occupancies are doing very well. Increasing the residential base. You're all, or most of you, I think, are in residential real estate. This was a very important tenet of Dwani's for us. Our goal is to attract 10,000 people to live downtown. We're probably between 6,000 and 7,000 right now. I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of the skyline that's down there now, the High Point, Beau Rivage, Saint-Tropez, Riviera, the Oasis Towers. And right before the two yellow towers there, the Beau Rivage and Riviera, is where Abel's new project, Cypress Club, is going to go. I think you're permitted for about 296 units. We're real excited about that. Our redevelopment board just issued a tax increment rebate and a development agreement that we're working on with Abel to be really the first one to come out of the ground since the recession with a new project in downtown. So we're really excited about that. One of the things when we were assembling or getting some of the high-rise development community going, everybody that came to us said, well, we need a grocery store. There's no place to shop downtown. We approached Publix. Won't go through the whole story, but Publix is a very shrewd, very tough negotiation team. But we end up with a 5-year rent subsidy. We got Publix to come in and sign a 25-year lease. The nice thing about that is it gave us design control over that building. Things like the back of Publix is probably the nicest back of a grocery store you'll ever see anywhere. We had a hand in that. Their loading docks are all undercover, so if you're in the high rises looking out from West 1st Street, you're not looking down on dumpsters and delivery trucks at 5 o'clock in the morning. They all go into that tunnel. Everything happens undercover and with sound attenuation. The liner buildings, residential blocking their parking lot from West 1st Street, the retail liner buildings on Altamont, makes for a unique design, something Publix didn't want to do, but with our rent subsidy, they agreed to let us do that. Dwani also said you need an eastern anchor to downtown. 1st Street used to end at about Jackson because that's where the French Connection and the restaurants were, they stopped at that point, and nobody really wandered much further. So when the library became outdated, we worked with the county to assemble a new library site. It's on the corner of 1st and Royal Palm, and that was a good collaboration between the city and the county. We bought the land for about $3.5 million, gave that to the county. Their library trust fund built the library. It's about a 45,000 square foot, 2-story urban style library with a terrific plaza in the front of it. Since that library opened, we've had almost 15 new businesses move in to that end of 1st Street or around the corner on Fowler Street. So that's really been a good anchor for us. I won't go through all of these, but this is a list of all of Dwani's recommendations. Every single one of them we've either finished, are currently working on, or it's in the planning or permitting stages. So we've followed that very, very closely. More recently, as I mentioned, we did a riverfront plan. When the housing market stopped and there was no more building going on, we convinced in the middle of the recession our city council to start focusing on the waterfront. Dwani had given us some general plans for that. It ought to be retail and restaurant and hotels and support for the convention business. But we wanted to go further than that. So we work with a team, HOK Populous Architects, along with a team called Aquest from Michigan. Came up with some major projects. And again, I won't go through all in detail, but I'll show you some of those. About half of it is public investment, the other half is private investment, and we've been actively working on it. Everything that's shown in white, which is basically the area from Bay Street to the river, are proposed new projects. And many of you know, one of the reasons people say, well, why aren't there more historic buildings down on the waterfront? Why isn't there more activity there? Well, historically, Bay Street was the shoreline of the river until the 19-teens and early 20s when they started filling in out to the current bulkhead line. So that's why, with the exception of the Hall of 50 States, which was moved there, there isn't any historic buildings out there. So what we want to do is grow downtown. Instead of just a one-dimensional town along First Street, we want to grow it out another block or two over to the riverfront and take advantage of Caloosahatchee. One of the first projects in the plan, and again, this was something we went to City Council, middle of the recession. The budget was down by about 40%. And we said, we want to spend $5 million building a water detention basin in the middle of downtown. After they laughed, they said, okay, we'll give it a try. We put in about a 2-acre water basin. Hopefully you've been down there. It's all seawalled, and it's the first of its kind. In fact, that you normally cannot permit a seawalled detention basin. They say it doesn't work. Well, ours is working just fine. The reason that's there is to filter the stormwater runoff from the streets that used to run straight out to the river. So if there was dirt, oil, grease, cigarette butts on the sidewalk, they got washed into the storm drains, went straight to the river. Now they go through the water basin. They have aeration in it. We have filters, settling basins, all kinds of things to clean the water before it flows through under Edwards Drive out to a weir structure we have under the walkway and into the river. So because of that, we were able to get $1 million in grants from Environmental Protection Agency. But one of the things it did, more importantly, is it attracted development. It has symbolically kind of brought the river back to its old shoreline, created a nice water quality feature, but more than that, it attracted a new hotel. Something we've been after for years to bring in here to tie into our convention center. So the River Basin project has been very successful. It's done exactly what we'd hoped it would. This second phase of the riverfront now is moving in phase. We just recently signed, we have one agreement left to go, but all the other agreements are signed for a developer out of California to build a 225-room full-service Sheraton convention quality hotel. It'll have a 210-car parking garage built into it. It's about a $48 million investment. It'll all be privately funded. The only thing the city is doing is giving $1 a year lease for the land until a hotel is built and stabilized, and then we get 1% of their gross room revenues, which is about $100,000 a year in land rent. So that's moving ahead, and this is the early rendering. Again, they have not done the colors or the fenestration. Right now they're working on schematic designs. So this is kind of the form that fits the function of the inside of the hotel. We've been working with the Starwood Group, the parent company of Sheraton, and we'll be getting more details about another 4 to 5 weeks on this, and hope to break ground in the first of the year. This is the view from Edwards Drive looking back at the hotel. It'll be in the parking lot that is right behind Harborside, and you'll be able to walk from the hotel directly into Harborside for meetings and conventions. So we hope that this will attract even more hotels. In fact, we had a call last week. The mayor and I did a conference call to a group out of Tampa who's interested in perhaps doing another hotel site. They work with the Marriott Autograph Series hotels. On the side of the hotel will be, on the first floor, a restaurant space, about a 5,000 square foot restaurant, indoor and outdoor seating. It'll overlook the water basin area. Some of the current initiatives that we're working on is Gardner's Park, Midtown some parking improvements, the old Amtel Hotel, First Street Village, and since I put this together, the Cypress Club site. And so we're real excited about that. Many of you may not be familiar with Gardner's Park. It's a little neighborhood that's between Fowler and Evans, just north of Martin Luther King. Runs all the way up actually to 2nd Street and then portions of it up onto the river along Fowler. We've been working with some of the residents and the business owners and property owners in there. It's a neat little old neighborhood. It's got some nice homes dating back from the teens and the 20s, some very mature tree canopies. But the idea is to make that into a more exciting residential neighborhood in support of downtown, but with some of its own unique characteristics. Gardner was the second mayor of Fort Myers. He was also a guava farmer, and so we've called the area the Garden Arts District. We're going to have community gardens. We're going to encourage artists to move in, which we've already begun to see that, where you can maybe buy or build a house and have your residence upstairs and a gallery and studio space downstairs. We're looking at maybe buying some of the vacant lots and put in shared parking, because some of the old homes didn't have a lot of parking because they didn't have cars back then. But again, this area is, MLK is on the south. On the right side of the slide is Park and Evans Avenue. On the left is Fowler Street. But we've just come up with some concepts that we're going to work with the neighborhood residents on to really rebuild that neighborhood. We see the opportunity to do a couple of nice neighborhoods like that with Edison Park on the other side of town, Dean Park, Woodford Park, and then Gardner's Park. The Midtown area is the area south of Martin Luther King down to Edison. It's where the old Red Sox Stadium is. We've been talking to City Council about what do we do with that area. It's kind of underutilized. There's some large vacant tracts of land that have been assembled, but at the same time it's got some assets. It has the former Red Sox spring training facility known as City of Palms Park. That's recently been leased by the county to Florida Southwestern College for their baseball program. So we'll have a regular series of games starting up there this year. It's actually booked about 165 days a year with college and high school tournaments, adult fantasy camp tournaments, things like that. But we're going to take the area from 41 to Fowler. We're just in the process of negotiating with a planning firm to do a design for this area. We have the state office building. We're getting ready to build a new fire station. The police station's in there. But what do we do with the rest of it? And what we're encouraging is increasing the zoning, allow mid to even high-rise mixed-use residential office buildings in that area because we're running out of office space downtown. This is an area that could easily grow and support the downtown, but be its own self-contained neighborhood with neighborhood convenience stores, coffee shops, easy walk if we make it very pedestrian friendly between the Midtown District and downtown. And currently that's known as Central Fort Myers. We're going to rename it, rebrand it as Midtown, similar to what we did with the Downtown River District. Parking improvements, our office, among other things, also runs the city parking operations. If you get a ticket, don't blame me. You should have parked right in the first place. We get a lot of appeals from parking tickets. I'm being facetious, but we get about 40 or 50 requests a week for, gee, I didn't know I couldn't park and not pay the meter, or couldn't park in the zip zone for 2 hours, for 3 hours, things like that. But some of the things we're doing, we've just spent over $1 million on the downtown garages, completely relit them with LED lighting, repainted, re-signed all the garages. We're getting ready to update the meters. As you know, we do have a 200 space free zone called a zip zone. If you're only coming down for 2 hours or less, you can park in there. If you're going to be more than 2 hours, go on a 10-hour meter, the parking garages for some of the lots. But we're going to update the meters so that they take credit cards, debit cards, coins, tokens, most anything. We're also going some of the latest technology where we're working on a system that as you're coming into town, you can have an app on your phone that'll show you where parking on the street is available. As cars leave, it'll show, okay, there's 3 spaces open on Henry between Edwards Drive and Bay Street. So it'll make it easier to find parking down there. So we're looking at updating the technology in the garages as well with the equipment in there. But that's something that we're actively pursuing. The old Amtel, again, Sheraton Ramada, whatever you remember it by, that has been purchased. They closed on it in February. They're getting ready to gut the inside of the building and convert it from a hotel into a 300-unit senior independent living facility. And there's about a $35 million rehab budget going into the project, so that's going to completely transform that what's currently now, they call it the pink eyesore. And then finally, First Street Village on the west side of town next to Publix. That site has recently been purchased by an investment group right here in the Fort Myers area. They're looking at following some of the original plans for the First Street Village, which is about 300 residential units with ground floor commercial, retail, and office space, some live-work units, kind of a network of roads and alleyways that go through the blocks. This is a large 8-acre site. So we're real excited that we've seen recently a lot of reinvestment taking place, not only in large sites, the multi-acre sites like Abel's just recently purchased for the Cypress Club, but small infill lots. There's a little lot on the corner First and Henry Street by the French Connection. David Fry, the former CEO of WCI, the home builder, just bought that. He intends to ultimately live on the top floor penthouse and do a 6 or 7 story building on that corner. The mayor's got a lot downtown. He's hired an architect to work on a new building to go on that site over on Bay Street. One of the law firms just bought the lot on Henry and 2nd Street for a new law office. So we're seeing a lot of investment starting to take place. So there's a lot going on. That's kind of where we're headed. If anybody has any questions or comments, I'll be happy to entertain them. And always get in touch with us at our office if you have any comments, questions, things you'd like to see us do. Yes, sir.
Any national chain restaurants coming into downtown?
Not that I'm aware of right now. We have been working with the Columbia restaurant, which I don't really call it a national chain. It's still a family-owned company. But the Columbia, which is out of Ybor City, is the oldest restaurant continuously in operation in the state of Florida. Been around since 1905. We've been working with Richard Gonsmart, the family president of the group right now. In fact, we're going back up there in a couple of weeks, the mayor, myself, the city manager, to talk to him. He's been interested in doing a location downtown. We really haven't talked to any national groups. As you probably know, the Kearns Restaurant Group has just opened their 5th restaurant downtown, the Lodge. They now have Edison, or Ford's, Firestones, Cabos, Capone's, and now the Lodge. This latest one, if you haven't been there, they spent over $1 million on the build out of it. It's an amazing place. It looks like a ski lodge up in the Colorado Rockies. But we're really trying to keep these well-capitalized local businesses. People like the Kearns Group, all the owners and partners in that are from Fort Myers. They're all local, know our market, and we think that's a niche that we'd like to really kind of follow. Yes?
The parking garage, that's owned by the city?
The city owns 2 parking garages. We've got a 3rd one that's on the drawing boards, but we're finding we have to go vertical with parking. But
We came out at an event a couple of years ago. I haven't gone in there since then because we couldn't get out. And it was something from a twilight. We used everything we could, but then we could get out. The gates wouldn't open.
We have a new parking company in the last year that we've done a lot of changes, including updating a lot of the equipment.
We couldn't call a phone number. It was
As one of the new systems we're putting in is you'll be able to talk live to somebody. There'll be a screen there that if you get out and have a problem, lose your credit card or lose your card to get out, you can talk to somebody live in person. That's some of the equipment that we're putting in. But the new company's done a great job in trying to update the technology, having somebody available. And when we have events now, we go to what we call pay on entry. You pay when you go into the garage so that when the event's over, the gates are open, you just drive right out. Also for big events, we're putting a police officer to control the light at Monroe and Bay Street so that cars can get through that intersection and not back up into the garage. Try us again.
no, it was just a whole bunch. We were all like, we had the money. We just
Yeah, I know. That can be extremely frustrating. Yes.
Dan, question. Would you be able to get this PowerPoint to Barbara to distribute to the attendees?
Excuse me?
Would you be able to get this PowerPoint presentation to Barbara to distribute
Oh,
to the
sure.
attendees?
Yeah, I can email it to you
Thank you.
if anybody likes it. Sure.
Make sure you have your cards. By the way, after Don is done, we're going to have a deal where you can go 2 or 3 or 4. Barbara will tell you more about it. Drop your card in. We're going to have some drawings for that. But make sure we have your card. We'll be happy to email.
we get a full round.
Well, some of the drawings are for the garage, the restaurant, the
Because-
yeah.
On the building that was the Olympian Art Building,
Right, City Pier.
there was just talk or rumor that that was going to be a restaurant.
Well, that was one actually, we put it out for proposals for restaurants. We had about 10 that took a look at it, including the Columbia. And that building was not designed to be a restaurant. And trying to fit that up for commercial kitchen, it's a 2-story building. It's tough to run a 2-story restaurant. Bottom line was nobody submitted a proposal. We're going to put that back out on the market probably this fall, along with some of the sites along the water basin, because on the east side of the basin, we have sites for restaurants and retail shops. Ideally, what we'd like is to get one developer that'll take maybe what's called the Smith Block, where the Hall of 50 States is located, the 3 sites along the water basin and the City Pier building, and kind of master plan that for a retail restaurant area. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
I just glanced at your plans for the downtown waterfront area. Is that to include increased marina type space also, or is that just?
The plan does include an expansion of the city yacht basin. The city actually has that out for proposals for if private individuals want to lease that and do the expansion and growth, because the city doesn't have the money to do it right now. But one of the things that council's been very consistent on is keeping the waterfront open to the public. We're not going to allow any private development to go right on the waterfront that would block access. So there'll always be the park. We may actually expand Centennial Park a little bit further to the east, over to the into the boat ramp area. Maintaining a river walk all around the waterfront. I know that the mayor and I have been kicking around the concept of one of the plans talked about a symphony hall down on the riverfront site, kind of a signature building, a Sydney Opera House, if you will. We'll have our Fort Myers.
Boston has its outdoor show.
Right. So we've looked at some opportunities to do things like that down there that would bring events a little bit closer into town. But there is a plan to add, I think it's about another 75 to 100 slips to the marina and expand that eventually. Yeah, Craig?
There was a developer who was talking about developing a high-rise tower out on the island by the bridge. Did that ever come?
Todd Gates owns the island out there, what's called Lofton's Island. He's the one who put the riprap in and the docks out there. I haven't talked to him recently, but he did actually engage an architect to take a look at designing some residential buildings to go out there, a very high-end kind of private, community, where you're on an island and certain level of security that comes with that. He had been looking at it, kind of marketing that internationally. I have not talked to him recently to see if that's on track, or I think at the time he felt the timing wasn't quite right to go ahead with it. Plus the fact that construction costs of building on an island are extremely high. But he still does own it. I think eventually he'd like to do something like that. I think it's going to be a question of if he finds the market strong enough to support it. Yes?
I missed that earlier, but did you have a timeline on Midtown build-out?
Midtown, we don't really have a timeline yet. We're just starting the planning. We've negotiated the contract with a planning firm. We should be awarding that in about 2 or 3 weeks. And we're actually holding off. The mayor is going up the first week in June. The mayor has been invited to the National Endowment for the Arts Mayor's Institute on City Design. Very prestigious thing to get invited to. They only pick 7 mayors to go at a time. And the project our mayor is going to be presenting there to the other 7 or 6 other mayors and a panel of national planning consultants is Midtown. And we want to get their ideas and their feedback, because we don't want Midtown to kind of take the place of downtown. We want it to support downtown and be a suburb, if you will. But my guess is we're looking at probably an 8 to 9 month planning session for that area. And then after that, we've got to go through the adoption process, which takes 3 or 4 months to get it through planning board and city council. But then at that point we'll identify, like we're doing for Gardner's Park, the key elements. What are the things that need to be done? It could be infrastructure, and get that programmed into the city's capital budget for any city expenses, and then start marketing and attracting private investors to hopefully follow our vision. But what we're finding is when we present a vision, like with a plan for Gardner's Park or downtown or the riverfront, it gets people thinking and excited about it. A lot of folks don't have the imagination to see what could be there, and when you show them some nice renderings and pictures, it's like, oh yeah, that's pretty neat, and they end up following it. So, but that'll be coming along here. But that's a multi-year project.
Is the Gardner's Park, is that a large area? I'm not that familiar with that.
It's really not. It's probably not more than about 50 or 60 acres of land. It's really about maybe 3 blocks wide between Fowler and Evans and Park Avenue. So it's not a very big area, but it's a real neat little neighborhood that we'd like to preserve.
So there's development there right now?
Right now it's mainly older homes. There's some commercial properties. There's some old warehouses at Thompson Street and Evans that have been turned into art galleries. In fact, there's a world-renowned artist who's in there, Marcus Jansen. I don't know if any of you are familiar with his work. He does very large format work, but he's got a 14,000 square foot studio and gallery in the warehouse buildings. So we'd like to encourage that. We'd like to get more artists moving into that area, creating more gallery and working artist space. I know Barbara's got other things. I'll take one more question back here and then let Barbara take you on a tour.
I forget what the space is called, but it's right across from the Imaginarium in MLK.
McCullum Hall?
Yeah, is there any update on that?
Yes, McCullum Hall's an old dance hall built in 1930s out on Martin Luther King and fell into real severe disrepair. In fact, it was in danger of really collapsing. We bought it several years ago from the McCullum family. We have re-roofed it, put a new back wall on it, and stabilized the building. We just hired an architect about a month ago to do the facade drawings for us, and we got a $500,000 grant from the state. So we're getting ready to do a complete facade restoration on the building. So the outside, the roof will all be redone. As soon as we can get a little bit more money to finish off the parking area around it and get the inside ready for tenant finishes, we'll be able to start leasing that out. We do have a restaurant, Sylvia's, out of Harlem, New York. It's a 50-year-old soul food restaurant that is interested in opening a restaurant there. But it'll have room for a restaurant, 3 retail shops, and then the dance hall is actually up on the 2nd floor, and we're going to turn that into a community meeting room where organizations from the Dunbar community will have a place in their local neighborhood to meet. Well, I want to thank you very much. Appreciate the attention, and I don't think I put anybody fully to sleep, and just want to acknowledge my wife who's here. I want to acknowledge my wife who's behind every good man there's a better woman. So she's kept me going for 28 years down here, and she's in real estate with, can I say that? Can I give you a commercial? Remax. So anyway, thank you again very much, and appreciate the opportunity to talk to you all.